Hello, today I'm going to help you understand how to prepare for IELTS. IELTS is International English Language Testing System. Now, I have very carefully shortlisted the learning of how to crack IELTS into 10 easy steps. And as obviously as the first step appears here, the first step is learn about the test. And under the first step, my first point of reference is content. You have to know as much as you can know about the test. The first thing is content. The test has 4 testing procedures to assess your listening, your reading, your writing, and your speaking ability. To display and demonstrate competency in a language, you have to be able to listen to someone, a native speaker speaking in the language, and understand. You have to be able to read language written and then be able to comprehend. You have to be able to write in that language and make yourself understood, and you have to be able to speak to a native speaker and have a conversation. Then you should understand the format of each of the tests. For instance, some time back, a student kept complaining after the test that he did not know that listening audio piece in the listening test was to be played just once. Now, this could have surprised him. I would recommend that you go through all the rules there are to each of the testing procedures so that you are not left bamboozled by any such hidden surprises. Timing. Timing is very, very crucial. Each test has its own time limit. For example, reading and writing are an hour-long test each. You get time to be able to judiciously accommodate all the tasks that you have to accomplish within the stipulated time. So use your time intelligently. Scoring. I shall make more videos on how each test is scored. But remember, for listening and reading, you get 1 mark for each correctly answered question. However, for writing and speaking, the assessor assesses you. Wait for my more videos to understand the nuances of how each test and question and task is scored. FAQs. I recommend go through FAQs. FAQs are frequently asked questions. There are dime a dozen content available on internet. And all the frequently asked questions help you learn a lot. I shall also put together a video on frequently asked questions. And academic or general. You should be very carefully choosing which of the 2 tests to register for. Academic is for people who wish to pursue higher education in English-speaking country, whereas general test is for those who wish to relocate to one of those English-speaking countries and want to take the test for that. Let's move on to step number 2, and that is have realistic goals. Friends, you must have realistic goals and not over-ambitious, over the top of the goals. By saying so, I mean, number 1, decide a band score. What band score do you require? Either you're going to take the academic test or general test. In both cases, you must be expected to achieve a certain score to get your desired result from the English-speaking country. Now, once you have that score in mind, that is from where onwards your preparation has to start. So you must decide a band score that you must have. Second step, check your level of English. At the end of the day, IELTS is an English proficiency test. So you must check your current level of English. In case your current level of English and IELTS band score that you demand is in sync, it's going to be relatively easier, because then you just have to prepare on IELTS on how to crack the exam. However, at times our level of English is slightly lower than the band that we expect, in which case we have to work hard and bring up our level of English up the curve to be able to start preparing for IELTS. So check your level of English. There are enough language experts around who know how to run a diagnostics on that. They know exactly what it takes to assess your current level of English for IELTS, and once you have the current level of English score, it just gives you an overview of how much effort does it expect from you. For instance, whether you should prepare for English before you start preparing for IELTS, or you can straight away start preparing for IELTS, or you should be doing both. Now let me explain this further. In case the gap between the band score that you expect on IELTS and your English is wider, then you need to first start working on your English and bring it up the curve in sync with band score that you expect. In which case you have to work on English first. In case your level of English is in sync with band score that you expect, or a little, just a little below it, you still can prepare for both together. And if you're lucky enough and your English and band score expected is in sync, then you can straight away start preparing for IELTS. Time frame. A lot of students ask me what time frame should they keep in mind when preparing for IELTS, and trust me, it is an impossible to answer question unless and until I have met the person who's preparing, because each person is different and this answer is going to be person specific. Some of us who need to work on English first may take months to come up the learning curve, and others who may take a little more time on working on IELTS than some of us who are quicker in working on IELTS. So depending upon your current skill set, your challenge area, and how much you take time to come up the curve in any department will determine how to plan your time. Lastly, requirement of the desired band score. Each band score requires you to demonstrate certain skills. For instance, reading and listening, you earn 1 mark for every correctly answered question. However, writing and speaking are assessed by the assessor. Now, for the assessor to give you a certain score, he or she seeks for certain skills for you to have demonstrated. Now, for you to know what band score you require and what are these skills that you need to live up to and demonstrate to the assessor, you have to be taught and trained on those finer things. So with that, we come to the end of point 2, have realistic goals. How to put your goals in place and prepare with respect to the goals that you have set for yourself. Go on to the next step, and the next step is learn about the questions. IELTS is all about questions and your mastery over each of those question types. For instance, listening and reading alone have 10 different types of questions. It is not a very wise idea to walk into an examination room, look at the questions and brainstorm on the spot how to answer those questions. I recommend, and strictly so, that you must never enter an examination center before learning how to deal with each of those different types of questions. So please make sure you know the kind of questions each assessment has. For instance, sometime back a student shared with me one of his essays and asked if I could assess his essay. I agreed. I said yes, I would. While I was reading his essay, I realized that his essay had questions which were not IELTS specific questions. Now with this I want to bring your attention to another important point. For instance, IELTS writing is different for academic and very different for general testing. Now, both the two testing types have essay writing, and first general assessment type also has letter writing, formal, semi-formal and informal letter writing, whereas academic writing test has summary for charts, graphs and diagrams. There are so many of those. You need to understand what kind of summary is to be written for what kind of image that you see. Similarly, every essay IELTS specific essay has IELTS specific questions. Now, internet has a lot of information, but I suggest to not get lost in the labyrinth of information available on internet. You must pick a reliable source to pick up your information from. IELTS essays are specific to testing procedure, and hence the questions are also IELTS specific. Now, the next sub point, and that is topics and vocabulary. Now, topics and vocabulary. Let's begin with topics. You should be prepared with several topics, rehearse and revise several topics before you enter an examination room, especially for writing and speaking. Create a repository of topics and practice and practice and practice before you think about going and taking your test. And the other thing is vocabulary. Now, vocabulary plays a pivotal role in IELTS because your assessor, especially the writing assessment and the speaking assessment, the assessor is going to very diligently be watching out for the kind of words you use. Our vocabulary is active and passive. Active vocabulary comprises of those words which we use relatively easily because those words are on the tip of our tongue. So build an appetite for using good words, the kind of words the assessor is going to be fishing for, because that influences your band score. So pay attention to vocabulary building and also rehearse and practice a lot of topics. Let's move on to the next step, and that is develop your ideas and topics. Your ideas and topics from a variety of sources like documentaries, like BBC, stroke any other international English channel, or New Scientist, or any magazine that gives you information about a variety of topics that are happening in the world around, and radio programs. Now, these are some of the sources that will help you collect information about all that is going on, and that information, if you know and have, will help you articulate your answers more effectively. A lot of people ask me if they should limit to listening to Australian English or British English when referring to documentaries and radio programs. To that, my answer is no, because IELTS is an international English language test, which means that the accent may not only be British English or Australian English. Even the assessors of IELTS may not only be British or Australians. So prepare yourself well on all these topics from these various sources. In fact, if you do not have a lot of time to dabble in all of this, I still suggest find some time to go through some of it. It will definitely come handy and help you articulate your answers better. At this point, we have reached the midway in our process of preparing for how to prepare for IELTS. And that is point number 5, which is use practice tests. Practice makes the man perfect. It could not have been better exemplified than preparation for IELTS. The more you practice, the better your chances are of getting your desired band score. Listening and reading. Listening and reading are 2 tests which have 40 questions each, and each question fetches you 1 mark. So as many correct answers, that much score you're able to cull for yourself. And the scores are directly proportional to the band score that you get. So if you want a good band score, you have to collect more scores. And that is made easier by practicing. And I recommend this book. This is IELTS 12. Now you have IELTS tests compiled in these booklets. There are loads of tests available in the market, but I recommend this because this is real IELTS tests. It has a compilation and collection of all the previous IELTS tests. Each book has 4 IELTS tests. So I recommend you use this to practice. It does not only help you practice the real IELTS test, but also helps you do your own scoring. So you don't only practice, but you know how to assess your test and what scores to give yourself. Now, writing and speaking. As I said, Curate and cultivate your own repository of topics. The more topics you practice, the better you are going to be at writing and speaking. So the more you practice, the better you will perform, and the chances of you getting your desired band score just elevate to a different level. Before we go on to the next point, I have just enough time to squeeze in an important tip, and that is, if you really want to get yourself assessed on your writing and speaking skills, I suggest find an ex-IELTS assessor who can help you assess your writing and speaking skills. Not only will the person be able to give you a band score, a more accurate band score, but also take assistance from the assessor to tell you and help you in locating your challenge areas, your weaknesses and your strength, and how to plan better to perform and prepare better. Moving on to our sixth point, which is develop your plan. By now, I'm sure you're convinced that you have to construct your own developmental plan. When someone asks me how to plan a schedule for preparing for IELTS, trust me, there is no formula which can be copied, pasted and sent across to all. Each one has to construct his or her own schedule for preparation. Why? Because we all are different. We have our own strengths, our own weaknesses and our own availability of time. So looking at all of that, you have to put together a permutation combination which suits you best. You know there are 4 test types, and you know the kind of questions each asks, and you know your strengths and weaknesses. Plan your structure of preparation accordingly. So you have to construct your own plan to prepare for IELTS. Nobody can help you do that. Okay, next. Build speed and time management. This is very critical, especially for reading and writing tests. Reading and writing both have stipulated time durations. If you miss out on time, you may not be able to accommodate all the answers. So when you're practicing, please time yourself, put an alarm clock and see if you can manage to answer all questions within the time limit, because time is very important. You may know answers, however, if you have slipped on timeline, you might not be able to do justice to your performance in the test. So please learn to manage your time when taking a test, and the recommended way is to at home practice with a clock right there, so that you can time yourself. If you can quickly skim and read and rapidly scan and find answers, you're good to go on reading. So please plan your time and speed accordingly. The final 3 points. Point number 8. Do full test under exam condition. I highly suggest that you take a full test under exam condition. Why? Because IELTS has 4 test types. 3 out of the 4 are to be conducted on the same day. Each test has its fixed timelines. So the day you take your final IELTS exam, you have listening, reading, writing back to back together, undisturbed without any break. That means 2 hours, 40 minutes of testing experience at one go. Trust me, to sit that long without wavering of your attention, with resilience and patience, and keep performing at peak performance is a different level of science. So it's a good idea to have exercised and prepared once before you take the final exam. So be at home and take a full test back to back before the final exam. For instance, even the distance between the restroom and the room where you take exam at the exam center can be a deterrent. Every extra minute that it takes to reach the restroom and back during your examination can be a huge caveat. So it's a good idea to have baked in all of that and practice and exercise before you appear for the final exam. Now, next point, point number 9. Go to a reliable resource to learn and train and prepare. So either you go to a formal IELTS school, a team that knows what IELTS is all about, or you go to online free training content. But if you can't afford this, you go here. However, I feel even if you can do a combination of both, it's not a bad idea. If you can find a school that can train you and also keep accessing material available online, it only adds volume to your practice content. And finally, the 10th point, and that is take test when both English and IELTS are at their strongest. Wait till such time when your English and your preparedness for IELTS are in sync. That's where we started from. You were to start from assessing your English skill, and you were to start from deciding what IELTS band score you aspire to achieve. Only when both are in sync is the ideal time to take your IELTS test. So all the best on that note. Work hard, prepare hard, and keep referring to our notes available online. And don't waste your time, learn online.